Jamal Washington, a 16-year-old black honor student, watches in disbelief as airport security approaches him in first class. Karen Thompson, a white executive, smirks from across the aisle after calling security. Then a distinguished older gentleman stands up, revealing a badge that instantly changes everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their appearance. Now, let's see how this first-class confrontation unfolds and the unexpected twist that leaves one passenger completely speechless. The day had started with such promise for Jamal Washington. After months of late nights and sacrificed weekends, his groundbreaking research on bias in facial recognition technology had earned him one of only 5 national scholarships to present at the prestigious Young Scientists of America competition in Boston. For a 16-year-old from South Atlanta, this wasn't just an opportunity, it was the golden ticket he'd been working towards since freshman year. "You earned this, baby," his mother Keisha had told him that morning, her eyes shining with pride despite the exhaustion from her overnight nursing shift. "And you're going to fly there in style." The first-class ticket had been her surprise. Keisha Washington had picked up double shifts for 3 months to afford it, something Jamal discovered only when he overheard her talking to his aunt on the phone. "Mama, we could have used that money for something else," Jamal had protested when she handed him the printed ticket. "There will always be bills to pay," Keisha said firmly, straightening his collar. "But my son only gets his first big recognition once. You deserve to feel like the champion you are." As he stood in the TSA line at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, Jamal couldn't help replaying the challenges of the past few years. The subtle dismissals from his freshman science teacher, Mr. Hoffman, who seemed surprised whenever Jamal aced a test. The guidance counselor who suggested more attainable goals when he'd mentioned MIT as his dream school. The group projects where other students assumed he'd handle the presentation part, rather than the technical calculations. Yet for every setback, there had been triumphs. The junior science fair where his project on algorithmic bias caught the attention of Dr. Patel, who became his mentor. The coding competition where he placed first statewide. And now, this scholarship that validated all his hard work. "Have a safe flight, Mr. Washington," the TSA agent said after carefully examining his ID for the 3rd time while waving through the businessman ahead of him with barely a glance. Jamal nodded politely, gathered his belongings, and headed for his gate. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Keep your head high, be twice as polite, and remember who you are." The boarding process gave him his first taste of first-class treatment. He was in Group 1, boarding before most passengers. The flight attendant at the gate, a blonde woman named Brittany according to her name tag, smiled warmly. "First time in first class?" she asked, noticing his barely contained excitement. "Yes, ma'am," Jamal replied, his normally deep voice cracking slightly. "Well, you're in for a treat," Brittany winked. "Seat 3A is by the window, just past the galley on your left." The first-class cabin was everything he'd imagined. Wide leather seats. Actual legroom. A menu for the flight. Jamal stowed his backpack containing his precious research notes and settled into his window seat, allowing himself a small smile. He belonged here as much as anyone else, he reminded himself, trying to quiet the anxious voice suggesting otherwise. He was reviewing his presentation notes when he sensed someone hovering by the aisle. Looking up, Jamal met the cool stare of a white woman in her 40s, designer handbag clutched in manicured hands, platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Karen Thompson had been having a terrible day. The hospital board meeting had run late, her proposal for department budget increases had been tabled until next quarter, and now her usual first-class seat preference had been changed due to aircraft substitution. As chief of hospital administration, she was accustomed to things going her way, and today was testing her patience. Seeing a teenager in what she considered prime first-class real estate only soured her mood further. A black teenager, no less, dressed in jeans and a button-up shirt rather than the business attire she associated with the front of the plane. "I believe you might be in the wrong section," she said, not bothering to check his seat number. "Boarding passes can be confusing. Main cabin is that way." She gestured toward the back of the plane. Jamal took a deep breath. "No, ma'am. 3A is my assigned seat." He held up his boarding pass as evidence. Karen's eyes narrowed as she scanned the document. Without another word, she settled into 3B beside him, her posture rigid with disapproval. "How did a kid like you end up in first class anyway?" she muttered, loud enough for him to hear while arranging her belongings. Jamal focused on his notes, pretending not to hear. Just another 4 hours to Boston, he told himself. He could handle anything for 4 hours. The flight attendant Brittany returned, offering pre-departure beverages. "Orange juice, please," Jamal requested politely. "Vodka tonic," Karen interjected. "And could you verify this young man's ticket again? I want to ensure everyone's in their proper place." Brittany's professional smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sir is exactly where he should be," she confirmed after glancing at Jamal's boarding pass. "Can I get you a snack before takeoff as well?" The exchange didn't improve Karen's mood. As more passengers boarded, she made a point of striking up conversations with other business travelers, making comments just loud enough for Jamal to hear. "Standards certainly aren't what they used to be," she remarked to the man across the aisle. "I remember when first class meant something." A distinguished-looking older black man in seat 4C glanced up from his medical journal, his eyes meeting Jamal's briefly with a look of understanding. "Dar." Raymond Carter had seen this scenario play out countless times during his 30 years as a neurosurgeon and 10 as an FBI medical consultant. As the plane filled, Karen made one last attempt to change seats, only to be informed by Brittany that the flight was completely full. Settling back with a huff, she pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some congestion on the tarmac. Our departure will be delayed approximately 30 minutes. Flight attendants, please remain seated." The announcement heightened the already tense atmosphere. Jamal returned to his notes, determinedly focusing on his presentation rather than the woman beside him, whose sidelong glances made it clear she considered his presence an affront to her travel experience. Little did Jamal know that the storm clouds gathering outside the aircraft window were nothing compared to what was brewing inside the cabin. The 30-minute delay stretched to 45 as the Atlanta afternoon sky darkened with storm clouds. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere grew equally turbulent. Jamal kept his focus on his tablet, reviewing the slides for his presentation on algorithmic bias in facial recognition software, a topic that had fascinated him since discovering that most AI systems misidentified black faces at alarming rates. Karen Thompson made her displeasure known through a series of increasingly audible sighs and comments to nearby passengers. "First they overbook the flight, then they stick us on the tarmac," she complained to the businessmen across the aisle. "And now we're all crammed in here with people who clearly don't belong." Jamal's fingers tightened around his tablet, but he maintained his composure. His mother's voice echoed in his head, "Never let them see they've gotten to you." Brittany, the flight attendant, noticed the tension and approached with a bottled water. "Everything okay here?" she asked, handing the water to Jamal with a supportive smile. "Everything's fine," Jamal replied quietly. "Actually, no," Karen interjected. "I'm concerned about the seating arrangements. Surely there must be some mistake." "All passengers are in their assigned seats, ma'am," Brittany responded professionally. "Can I get you anything to make you more comfortable during the delay? You can explain to me how a teenager can afford a first-class ticket when business travelers are being waitlisted," Karen hissed, just low enough that other passengers couldn't hear, but loud enough for Jamal and Brittany. "In seat 4C, Dr." Raymond Carter observed the interaction with growing concern. At 62, the neurosurgeon had experienced plenty of racism throughout his distinguished career. He recognized the familiar pattern unfolding and debated whether to intervene. Sometimes these situations resolved themselves, other times, they escalated dangerously. "I earned my seat," Jamal finally said, his voice steady despite the slight tremor in his hands. "I'm presenting at the Young Scientists of America competition in Boston." Karen snorted. "Right. And who paid for this little field trip? The taxpayers, I'm guessing." The comment struck Jamal like a physical blow. He thought about his mother's double shifts, her tired eyes, her insistence that he take this opportunity. He thought about the countless hours he'd spent perfecting his research, the weekends sacrificed, the sleepless nights. "I won a national scholarship," he replied, his voice tight. "And my mother worked extra shifts to upgrade my ticket as a gift." "How nice for you," Karen said, her tone making it clear she didn't believe him. She turned to her phone, typing quickly before turning to signal another flight attendant walking through the cabin. This one, a middle-aged man named Thomas, approached with a professional smile. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Karen lowered her voice, but not enough to prevent Jamal from hearing. "I don't feel comfortable with my seating assignment. This young man is making me uncomfortable. Could you please check his ticket again? I don't believe he belongs in first class." Thomas glanced at Jamal, who sat rigid with humiliation, then back to Karen. "Ma'am, all passengers have been properly boarded. If you'd like to request a seat change, I can check if any options are available once we're in the air." "You don't understand," Karen persisted, her voice rising slightly. "I don't feel safe." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Several nearby passengers turned to look. Jamal felt his chest tighten, aware of the dangerous territory Karen's accusation was entering. "Ma'am, is the passenger behaving inappropriately?" Thomas asked, now serious. "He's not who should be sitting here," Karen replied. "I've paid too much money to feel threatened during my flight." Jamal's heart pounded. The word, threatened, was like a match to gasoline in situations like this. He'd seen the news stories, watched the viral videos of police being called on black people for simply existing in spaces others felt they didn't belong. "I haven't done anything," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter set down his medical journal, his attention now fully on the unfolding situation. He'd seen that look of panic on young black men's faces before. As both a doctor and FBI consultant, he knew how quickly these situations could spiral out of control. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, "Folks, unfortunately, our delay is going to be extended due to a mechanical check. We're looking at another 30 minutes before departure." The announcement seemed to embolden Karen. While Thomas went to assist another passenger, she pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Jamal caught a glimpse of her screen. She was texting someone about feeling unsafe with a suspicious teenager next to her. His stomach dropped. He knew what came next in stories like this. "Excuse me," Karen called out loudly to Brittany, who was passing with a tray of water. "I need to speak with the air marshal or security. I've repeatedly expressed concerns about my seatmate, and no one is taking me seriously." The cabin grew quieter as passengers tuned into the drama. Jamal felt the familiar weight of eyes on him, judging, assuming. He'd experienced this feeling throughout his life, in stores where security followed him, in upscale neighborhoods where residents questioned his presence, in advanced classes where teachers expressed surprise at his intelligence. But never had the stakes felt so high. If he missed this flight, he'd miss the competition. The scholarship, the opportunity, his mother's sacrifice, all would be for nothing. Karen's phone buzzed. She read the incoming message with satisfaction before turning to Jamal. "Security is on their way. I suggest you come clean now about how you really ended up in this seat." Jamal's throat constricted, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. He would not cry. Not here. Not now. He straightened his spine and met Karen's gaze directly. "My name is Jamal Washington. I'm 16 years old. I have a 4.2 GPA. I'm a National Merit Scholar. I created an algorithm that identifies and corrects racial bias in facial recognition technology. I belong in this seat. Karen's expression hardened. We'll let security decide where you belong. As if on cue, 2 airport security officers appeared at the front of the cabin, guided by the flight attendant Thomas. Jamal's heart sank as they made their way directly to row 3. The 2 security officers moved purposefully down the aisle, their uniforms and stern expressions causing a hush to fall over the first-class cabin. Passengers shifted in their seats, some pretending not to watch while others openly stared. A few pulled out phones, their camera lenses trained on the unfolding scene, modern witnesses to what many recognized as an all-too-familiar scenario. Officer Michael Davis, an African-American man in his 30s, led the way, followed by his partner, Officer Sarah Jenkins, a white woman with her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. They stopped at row 3, where Jamal sat frozen, his presentation notes still open on his tablet. "Excuse me, sir," Officer Davis addressed Jamal, his tone professional but not unkind. "We need to see your boarding pass and identification." Jamal's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet. His mother's warnings played on repeat in his mind: if an officer ever approaches you, move slowly. Keep your hands visible. Be respectful no matter what. Your life depends on it, baby. "Yes, sir," Jamal replied, his voice steadier than he felt. He extracted his student ID and boarding pass, handing them over with deliberate, careful movements. Karen Thompson straightened in her seat, a satisfied expression on her face. "Thank you for responding so quickly," she said to the officers. "I don't feel safe sitting next to him. He's been behaving suspiciously, and I have reason to believe he shouldn't be in first class." Officer Davis glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to Jamal's documents. "And what exactly has he done that seems suspicious, ma'am?" Karen faltered momentarily before regaining her composure. "He doesn't belong here. Look at how he's dressed. He's clearly not a business traveler, and he can't explain how he afforded this ticket." "I did explain," Jamal interjected quietly. "I won a scholarship for a science competition in Boston. My mother bought this ticket for me as a gift. She's a nurse at Grady Memorial." Officer Jenkins studied the boarding pass and ID. "These appear to be in order," she noted, then addressed Jamal directly. "You're a minor traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm 16. Jamal swallowed hard, aware of the dozens of eyes on him, the humiliation burning in his chest. In his peripheral vision, he could see passengers recording the interaction on their phones. Would he become the next viral video? The next hashtag? The thought made him nauseated. "He's been watching me," Karen added, her voice rising slightly. "Taking notes. I saw him looking at my purse earlier." Jamal's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's not true. I've been reviewing my presentation notes. I haven't even looked at her." Dr. Raymond Carter in seat 4C had seen enough. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, his imposing 6'2" frame and distinguished appearance drawing immediate attention. However, he remained in his row, observing carefully, not yet intervening but making his awareness of the situation known. Officer Davis, noticing the movement, made brief eye contact with Dr. Carter before turning back to Karen. "Ma'am, has the young man made any threatening statements or movements toward you?" "Well, no, not explicitly, but..." "Has he touched you or your belongings?" "No, but I can tell he, so your concern is based on..." Officer Davis left the question hanging. Karen's cheeks flushed. "Officer, I've been flying first class for 15 years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. There's no way this boy could afford. I have his valid boarding pass right here, ma'am," Officer Jenkins interrupted, her professional tone tinged with disapproval. "It shows he's assigned to seat 3A. Several rows back, a white man in a business suit spoke up. "The kid's been quiet the whole time. The only disturbance I've seen is coming from the lady making the complaint. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the cabin. Brittany, the flight attendant who had first welcomed Jamal, stepped forward. "Officers, I can confirm that this young man has been a perfect gentleman since boarding. He's caused no disturbances whatsoever." The tide of public opinion seemed to be shifting. Jamal felt a flicker of relief, but it was quickly extinguished by Karen's next words. "He has something in his bag," she insisted, pointing to Jamal's backpack tucked under the seat in front of him. "I saw him checking it nervously several times." The accusation hung in the air, dangerous in its implication. In the post-9/11 era of air travel, few allegations carried more weight. Officer Davis's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected a weariness that suggested he'd seen this script play out before. "Sir, would you mind if we take a look at your bag?" Jamal's throat tightened. His research notes, his presentation materials, his personal journal, all would be exposed and scrutinized. But he had no choice. "No, sir, I don't mind." As he reached down to retrieve his backpack, Karen flinched dramatically, as if expecting him to pull out a weapon. The gesture wasn't lost on Officer Jenkins, whose lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Jamal handed over his backpack, which Officer Davis placed on an empty seat across the aisle. He unzipped it carefully and began cataloging its contents aloud. 1 laptop computer. 1 tablet. Research papers titled "Addressing Racial Bias in Facial Recognition Algorithms." Scientific journal printouts. A letter from Young Scientists of America confirming participation in their national competition. A photograph of the young man with what appears to be his mother. Snacks. Headphones. With each item, Karen's expression grew more pinched. Several passengers exchanged knowing glances. Officer Davis zipped the bag closed and returned it to Jamal. "Everything seems to be in order here." "But," Karen began. The captain's voice interrupted over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to the ongoing situation in the cabin, we're going to have to ask all passengers to deplane while we resolve this matter. Please gather your belongings and proceed to the jetway in an orderly fashion." Jamal's heart sank. The delay would likely mean missing his connection in Boston, possibly missing the competition entirely. All his work, his mother's sacrifice, undone by one woman's prejudice. "This is ridiculous," a passenger muttered. "Making us all deplane because of one racist complaint." Karen bristled. "I am not racist. I'm just concerned about safety." As passengers began collecting their belongings, Jamal sat motionless, devastation washing over him. He picked up his phone to call his mother, dreading having to tell her what had happened, when a firm hand gently touched his shoulder. He looked up to find Dr. Raymond Carter standing beside him, an FBI consultant badge now visible on a lanyard around his neck. "Don't worry, son," he said quietly. "This isn't over yet." Dr. Raymond Carter stood tall beside Jamal's seat, his presence commanding immediate attention. The cabin had fallen into a hush as passengers paused their deplaning to witness what was happening. Some still held their phones up, recording every moment of the unfolding drama. "Officers, Dr. Carter addressed Davis and Jenkins, his deep voice carrying authority gained from decades as one of Atlanta's most respected neurosurgeons. "I've been observing this situation since it began. Before we take the drastic step of deplaning, I'd like to provide my perspective as a witness." Officer Davis's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Dr. Carter? Didn't you consult on the Martinez case last year?" "Indeed I did, Officer Davis," Carter confirmed with a nod. "I've worked with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit as a medical consultant for the past decade. But today, I'm simply a concerned citizen witnessing an injustice." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced his FBI consultant credentials, causing a ripple of whispers throughout the cabin. Karen Thompson's smug expression faltered as she stared at the badge. "Young Mr. Washington here, Dr. Carter continued, gesturing toward Jamal, has been nothing but respectful and quiet since boarding. The only disturbance in this cabin has come from Ms. Thompson, who has repeatedly harassed him based on what appears to be racial prejudice. Karen's face flushed crimson. That's absurd. I never said anything about race. You didn't have to, Ms. Thompson, Dr. Carter replied calmly. Your implications were clear to everyone in earshot. He turned to face Karen directly, his expression stern but composed. What you may not realize, Ms. Thompson, is that I not only consult for the FBI, but I also serve on the board of directors at Northside Hospital, where, if I'm not mistaken, you work as chief of hospital administration. The color drained from Karen's face as quickly as it had appeared. Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly as the implications of his statement sank in. Flight attendant Brittany stepped forward. Officers, I can confirm that Mr. Washington has been a model passenger. Ms. Thompson, however, has been disruptive since boarding, questioning his presence repeatedly despite verification of his ticket. Other passengers began speaking up as well. The kid was just reading his notes, said a businessman from across the aisle. I watched her make faces every time he moved, added a woman in row 2. She's the one who should be removed, not him, called someone from further back. Officer Jenkins turned to Jamal. Son, what exactly are you working on that's taking you to Boston? Jamal straightened in his seat, finding his voice. It's a project on bias in facial recognition technology, ma'am. My algorithm helps correct for racial disparities in how the software identifies people of different skin tones. Current systems misidentify black faces at 5 times the rate of white faces. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the cabin. A few passengers let out low whistles or knowing chuckles. So you're literally working to prevent bias based on appearance, Officer Davis stated, not bothering to hide his appreciation of the situation's irony. Yes, sir, Jamal replied. My mother says if you see a problem, you should try to fix it instead of just complaining. Karen began gathering her belongings hastily. This is ridiculous. I simply expressed a security concern as a paying customer. I'm getting off this flight. Actually, ma'am, Officer Jenkins interjected, we'd like you to remain seated for now. Filing a false report is a serious matter, and using law enforcement resources for racially motivated complaints can have legal consequences. The captain appeared at the front of the cabin, surveying the situation. After a brief consultation with the officers and flight attendants, he addressed the passengers. Folks, I apologize for the confusion. There's no need for everyone to deplane. However, we will be asking one passenger to leave the aircraft before we proceed. All eyes turned to Karen Thompson, who had shrunk into her seat, her earlier confidence evaporated. Have you ever witnessed someone being discriminated against because of their appearance? Comment 1 if you believe Karen should face consequences for her actions, and 2 if you think she deserves a second chance. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories about justice being served. Now, what do you think will happen next? Will Jamal make it to his competition in Boston? Will Karen face professional consequences for her behavior? And how will this experience change both of their lives? Let's find out. The next 20 minutes unfolded like a scene from a movie Jamal had never wanted to star in. The captain's announcement had been clear, one passenger would be deplaning before the flight could continue to Boston. That passenger was Karen Thompson. This is outrageous, Karen protested as airline staff approached her seat. I paid for this ticket. I'm a platinum member. Ma'am, the lead flight attendant said firmly, the captain has determined that your behavior is disruptive to the safety and comfort of other passengers. We've arranged for you to take the next available flight to Boston. You can't be serious, Karen hissed, lowering her voice as she noticed several passengers still recording. All I did was express a security concern. Dr. Carter, who had returned to his seat but remained attentive to the situation, spoke up. You weaponized this young man's race against him, Ms. Thompson. As someone in healthcare leadership, you should understand the seriousness of that action. The mention of her professional position seemed to penetrate Karen's indignation. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. I didn't mean. She began, but the excuses died on her lips as she looked around at the unsympathetic faces surrounding her. 2 airline representatives had boarded the plane and now stood waiting in the aisle. "Ms. Thompson, please gather your belongings and come with us," one said firmly. As Karen collected her carry-on from the overhead bin, she avoided making eye contact with anyone, especially Jamal. The cabin remained eerily silent as she made her way toward the exit, the only sounds the rustle of her clothing and the soft thud of her designer boots on the carpet. Just before she reached the door, she paused and half-turned, perhaps contemplating a final justification or defense. But faced with dozens of stern faces, she simply turned back and disappeared down the jetway. A spontaneous smattering of applause broke out among the passengers. Brittany approached Jamal with a bottle of water and a kind smile. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Jamal nodded, though his hands still trembled slightly. The adrenaline that had kept him composed was ebbing, leaving him drained. "Will this delay the flight much longer? I really can't miss my connection in Boston." The reality of potentially missing the competition hit him anew. He pulled out his phone to call his mother, dreading having to explain what had happened. "Mama," he said when she answered, his voice cracking slightly. "Something happened on the plane." As he recounted the events, his mother's reactions ranged from outrage to pride in how he'd handled himself. "I'm coming to the airport right now," Keisha Washington declared when he finished. "No one treats my baby that way." "Mom, no, you just worked a double shift." "I'm okay now. Dr. Carter helped me." "Dr. Carter?" she asked. "A doctor who was on the flight. He stood up for me," Jamal explained, glancing gratefully at the older man who was now speaking with the captain near the cockpit. While Jamal was on the phone, airline staff had boarded with paperwork and were speaking with the security officers. Social media was already doing what it did best, spreading the story faster than anyone could control it. Hashtags like #FirstClassWhileBlack and #KarenThompson were trending on various platforms as passengers uploaded their videos. Dr. Carter returned to Jamal's row, sitting in what had been Karen's seat. "The captain assures me we'll be taking off shortly," he said. "But I'm concerned about your connection in Boston. My competition starts tomorrow morning," Jamal explained, the worry evident in his voice. "If I miss the orientation tonight, I might not be allowed to present." Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. "Let me make a few calls. I have colleagues at Massachusetts General who might be able to help if needed." The airline's customer service director approached them next, a tablet in hand. "Mr. Washington. On behalf of the airline, I want to sincerely apologize for your experience today. We're arranging priority boarding for your connection in Boston, and we've upgraded you to first class on your return flight as well." The gesture was appreciated, but Jamal's thoughts remained focused on the competition. "Thank you, but I'm worried about making my connection. The orientation for my science competition starts at 7 p.m. "I understand, sir. We're going to do everything possible to get you there on time." The director handed him a card with a phone number. "This is my direct line. If you have any issues with your connection, call me immediately." As the crew prepared for departure, Jamal stared out the window at the Atlanta tarmac, processing the whirlwind of events. What should have been one of the most exciting days of his life had turned into something far more complicated. Dr. Carter seemed to read his thoughts. "Young man, I know this isn't how you envisioned your journey beginning. But you handled yourself with remarkable dignity. That speaks volumes about your character." "Thank you, sir," Jamal replied. "I just hope I can still focus on my presentation after all this." "You know," Dr. Carter said thoughtfully, "your experience today directly relates to your research. Algorithmic bias and human bias stem from the same root, assumptions made based on limited information. Perhaps this unfortunate incident might actually strengthen your presentation. The insight struck Jamal like a bolt of lightning. He hadn't considered how his personal experience could inform his academic work. As the plane finally began to taxi toward the runway, nearly 2 hours behind schedule, he opened his tablet and began making notes, a new determination taking hold. Meanwhile, in the terminal, Karen Thompson sat alone in an airline lounge, her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. Videos of the incident were spreading rapidly across social media. Her hands shook as she opened an email from her hospital's HR department requesting an immediate meeting upon her return. A text message from her husband appeared, "What have you done? It's all over Twitter. The hospital board is furious." The gravity of her actions was beginning to sink in. This wasn't going to disappear with a simple apology or explanation. Her career, reputation, and self-image were all suddenly at risk because of assumptions she'd made about a teenager she didn't know. As the plane carrying Jamal finally lifted off toward Boston, Karen Thompson sat alone with the consequences of her actions just beginning to unfold, the full weight of what she'd set in motion still incomprehensible to her. The damage control she would need to perform seemed insurmountable. But for now, all she could do was wait for her rescheduled flight and watch as her name became synonymous with racial prejudice across the internet, one share at a time. Karen Thompson sat rigid in her seat at gate B23, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her lap. The Atlanta airport bustled around her, travelers rushing to destinations, completely unaware of how her life had imploded in the past 90 minutes. Her rescheduled flight to Boston wouldn't depart for another 3 hours, leaving her plenty of time to watch her carefully constructed life unravel notification by notification. Her phone vibrated again, the 7th call from her husband, David, that she'd let go to voicemail. How could she explain what had happened? That some maternal instinct about safety had triggered her reaction. That she genuinely felt uncomfortable. Every justification now sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Finally, she answered on the 8th call. "David, I can't talk right now." "You need to talk right now." Her husband's voice was tense, controlled fury evident in every syllable. "Do you have any idea what's happening? Your name and face are all over Twitter and Instagram. #HospitalKaren is trending. The hospital's PR team has called me 3 times because they can't reach you." Karen closed her eyes, her free hand massaging her temple where a migraine was forming. "It wasn't how they're making it look. That boy." "Stop." David cut her off. "That boy is Jamal Washington. He's 16. He's a National Merit Scholar who created an algorithm to reduce racial bias in technology. And you just accused him of, what exactly, Karen? Being black in first class?" The bluntness of his question struck her like a physical blow. "I never said anything about race," she whispered, though the defense sounded weak even to her own ears. "You didn't have to. It was implied in every action you took." David's voice had taken on a tone she'd never heard before, disappointment mixed with something like disgust. "And to make it worse, you did it in front of Raymond Carter. Do you even realize who he is?" "Some doctor who consults for the FBI," Karen muttered. "He's not just some doctor, Karen. He's one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the Southeast. He pioneered the surgical technique that saved your sister's life 3 years ago. He sits on our hospital board and chairs the diversity committee. And you just showed him exactly who you are." The weight of this revelation settled over Karen like a shroud. She recalled Dr. Carter's dignified intervention, the quiet authority in his voice, the disappointment in his eyes. Had that been the man who had operated on Emily, whose hands had delicately navigated her sister's brain aneurysm, giving her a second chance at life? Karen's phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line, "Immediate administrative leave, urgent response required." Sender, Northside Hospital Board of Directors. "They've suspended me," she said, her voice hollow. "They had no choice," David replied. "The videos are everywhere. Your badge is clearly visible. You're the chief of hospital administration, Karen. You're supposed to uphold the hospital's values of diversity and inclusion, not become a case study in implicit bias. What am I supposed to do now? The question came out small, frightened, so unlike her usual confident tone. Come home, David said, his voice softening slightly. We'll figure it out. But Karen, you need to take a hard look at what happened today. Really look at it. After ending the call, Karen finally gathered the courage to search her own name online. The results were devastating. Dozens of videos from multiple angles showed the incident on the plane. In one particularly damning clip, she was clearly visible pointing at Jamal's bag and mouthing, "Suspicious," to a flight attendant. Another showed her flinching when Jamal reached for his backpack, a reaction that now, seen through the lens of a camera, appeared performative and calculated. The comments beneath the videos were merciless. Another day, another Karen calling security on a black person for existing. She works at a hospital. How many black patients has she discriminated against? Imagine being so racist you get yourself kicked off a plane just to avoid sitting next to a black honor student. Karen's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't who she was, or at least, not who she thought she was. She'd voted for Obama. She had black colleagues she respected. She'd never used racial slurs. How could she be the villain in this story? A memory surfaced, uncomfortable and uninvited. Last month's diversity training at the hospital, which she'd attended with thinly veiled impatience. The facilitator explaining how implicit bias operated below conscious awareness. Karen had checked her emails throughout the presentation, certain that such training was unnecessary for someone like her. Now, sitting alone in the crowded airport, Karen confronted an uncomfortable truth: perhaps she didn't know herself as well as she thought. Her phone rang again, an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Ms. Thompson. This is Gloria Williams from Channel 5 News. We'd like to get your statement regarding the incident on Flight 1382 today. Karen ended the call without speaking, panic rising in her chest. The media was already involved. How far would this go? Another email appeared, this one from the hospital's legal department, requesting an urgent conference call. The subject line made her stomach clench. Potential violation of hospital non-discrimination policies. In just 2 hours, she had gone from respected healthcare executive to social media pariah. Her career, built over 20 years of dedicated work, teetered on the brink of collapse. Karen's thoughts turned to Jamal Washington. What must he have felt, singled out and humiliated for simply occupying space she deemed inappropriate for him? The shame of this realization burned through her, impossible to ignore. She gathered her belongings and headed for the airport exit. She wouldn't be going to Boston today. Instead, she needed to go home and face what she had done, and more importantly, why she had done it. As she waited for her Uber, Karen drafted and deleted a dozen apology texts to her staff, to the hospital board, to Dr. Carter. None of them seemed adequate. The words fell flat, insufficient against the magnitude of her actions. The truth was inescapable now. She had judged a young man based solely on his appearance, assumed the worst without evidence, and potentially caused lasting harm. No apology could instantly undo that damage. This would require something much deeper than words. As her Uber pulled away from the airport, Karen Thompson stared out at the Atlanta skyline, contemplating a difficult journey that had nothing to do with air travel, the long, uncomfortable examination of biases she had denied for far too long. 38,000 feet above the eastern seaboard, Jamal Washington stared out at the clouds below, still processing the whirlwind of events that had transformed what should have been a simple flight into a life-altering experience. The seat beside him, previously occupied by Karen Thompson, remained empty, a small mercy that allowed him space to breathe and reflect. Dar. Raymond Carter had returned to his original seat after ensuring Jamal was okay, but he checked in periodically, offering quiet words of encouragement and practical advice about navigating the remainder of the journey to Boston. "How are you holding up?" Dr. Carter asked, pausing by Jamal's row during a visit to the lavatory. "Better, sir." "Thank you," Jamal replied, his voice steadier than it had been an hour earlier. "I just got a text that they're holding my connection, so I should still make it to the orientation tonight." "Excellent," Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. "And your presentation? Will you be ready?" A determined expression crossed Jamal's face. "Actually, I've been reworking some of my slides. I think what happened today makes my research even more relevant." "How so?" Dr. Carter asked, genuine interest in his voice. "My algorithm addresses how facial recognition technology misidentifies black faces because of biases in the training data," Jamal explained, warming to his subject. "But today showed me that the problem isn't just in computers, it's in people too. The algorithm and the airline passenger are making the same mistake, jumping to conclusions based on incomplete or biased information." Dr. Carter's eyes lit up with appreciation. "That's an insightful connection, young man. Personal experience informing scientific inquiry, that's the hallmark of meaningful research." As the doctor returned to his seat, Jamal turned back to his tablet, fingers flying across the screen as he integrated this new perspective into his presentation. For the first time since security had approached his seat, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This incident, painful as it was, had given his research a dimension that no amount of laboratory work could have provided. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, "Just spoke to Dr. Carter. He told me how brave you were. So proud of you, baby. Call me when you land. Love you." Jamal smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for his mother's unwavering support. Keisha Washington had raised him alone since his father's death when Jamal was 7, working long hours as a nurse to provide for him while still making time to attend every science fair and academic competition. Her sacrifice had made today possible, and he was determined not to let this incident overshadow what he had accomplished. The flight attendant Brittany stopped by his seat with a fresh orange juice. "Hanging in there?" she asked kindly. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for standing up for me earlier." "You shouldn't have needed anyone to stand up for you," she replied, shaking her head. "But I want you to know, we've filed a formal incident report. The airline takes discrimination very seriously." The plane began its descent into Boston Logan International Airport, the captain announcing their approach. Jamal saved his presentation and packed away his tablet, mentally preparing for the next leg of his journey. As promised, an airline representative was waiting for him at the gate when they deplaned. "Mr. Washington. I'm Carlos Martinez, Customer Service Manager. We have a car waiting to take you directly to your connection. It's boarding now, but the crew knows you're coming." "Dar." Carter approached before Jamal could leave. "Here's my card," he said, handing Jamal a business card embossed with the hospital logo and his contact information. "I'd like to hear how your presentation goes. And if you're ever considering medical school or need a mentor, please don't hesitate to reach out." Jamal accepted the card with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Carter. For everything. No thanks needed. Just excel at that competition. That's how you answer what happened today, with excellence." The transfer to his connecting flight went smoothly, and before he knew it, Jamal was touching down in Boston, the city lights twinkling in the early evening darkness. Despite the delay, he would make the orientation with just minutes to spare. In the taxi to the hotel, Jamal called his mother as promised, recounting the rest of his journey and Dr. Carter's encouragement. "That man is a blessing," Keisha said. "And he's right, you show them who you are through excellence. Nothing silences prejudice like success." The Massachusetts Institute of Technology Conference Center was abuzz with activity when Jamal arrived. Young scientists from across the country gathered in small groups, some he recognized from previous competitions, others new faces. For a moment, self-consciousness washed over him, did they know what had happened? Had the videos spread to this crowd too? His question was answered almost immediately when Lily Chen, a fellow competitor he'd met at regionals last year, approached him with wide eyes. "Jamal. Oh my God, was that really you on that flight? It's all over TikTok and Twitter." Jamal nodded, unsure how to respond. Before he could formulate an answer, the competition director, Dr. Patel, approached. "Mr. Washington, we're glad you made it," she said warmly. "We were concerned when we heard about the delay." "I'm sorry if I'm late, Dr. Patel. There was an incident on my flight." "We're aware," she replied, her expression sympathetic but professional. "Are you feeling up to participating? We would completely understand if you needed time." Jamal straightened his shoulders. "I'm ready, Dr. Patel. In fact, I've updated my presentation to incorporate some new insights." "Excellent," she smiled. "You're scheduled to present tomorrow at 10 a.m. For now, join the welcome reception. The judges are eager to meet all our finalists." As Jamal moved through the reception, he was approached by several other competitors who had seen the videos. Some offered awkward sympathy, others shared their own experiences with racial profiling. While the attention was uncomfortable, Jamal found himself embracing Dr. Carter's advice, turning a negative experience into fuel for his academic purpose. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Jamal put the finishing touches on his presentation. He added a new slide near the beginning: "Algorithmic bias isn't created in a vacuum. It reflects and amplifies human biases already present in society. To solve one, we must address both." He fell asleep that night with renewed determination. Tomorrow, he would channel everything, the humiliation, the anger, the support he'd received, into presenting his research with a passion and perspective that no other competitor could match. What had started as a traumatic experience was transforming into something else, a powerful testimony to resilience and the very real implications of the problem his research sought to address. Jamal Washington was no longer just a competitor, he was living proof of why his work mattered. By the time Jamal took the stage for his presentation the next morning, the story had exploded across national media. #FirstClassWhileBlack was trending on multiple platforms, with major news networks picking up the story. The video footage from the flight had been viewed millions of times, sparking heated discussions about racial profiling, privilege, and the everyday indignities faced by people of color in America. Jamal hadn't slept much, partly from nervousness about his presentation, but also from the surreal experience of watching himself become the center of a national conversation on racism. His phone had been flooded with messages from friends, teachers, and even strangers expressing support and outrage on his behalf. But as he stood before the judges and fellow competitors at the Young Scientists of America competition, Jamal found a calm clarity he hadn't expected. This moment, presenting his research on algorithmic bias in facial recognition technology, was what he had worked toward for months. The incident on the plane had given him a new perspective, but it wouldn't define him or this opportunity. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. "My name is Jamal Washington, and my research addresses racial bias in facial recognition algorithms. As many of you may have seen from recent events, bias isn't just a technical problem, it has real-world consequences for real people." The audience, already attentive, seemed to lean forward collectively. Jamal proceeded to deliver a presentation that seamlessly blended technical brilliance with personal insight, explaining how facial recognition systems misidentified black faces at 5 times the rate of white faces, and how his algorithm incorporated more diverse training data and adjusted for systematic errors. When technology fails to recognize certain faces accurately, he concluded, it reflects and amplifies existing social biases. But unlike human prejudice, algorithmic bias can be identified, measured, and corrected through careful analysis and programming. Perhaps there's a lesson there for addressing bias in our society as well. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. The judges' questions were probing but respectful, and Jamal answered each with a confidence born from months of research and a lifetime of navigating spaces where he was underestimated. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Keisha Washington was experiencing her own kind of viral attention. News vans had gathered outside their modest home in South Atlanta, reporters eager to interview the mother of the young man at the center of the trending story. She had taken the day off from her nursing shift, overwhelmed by the sudden intrusion of media into their lives. "Ms. Washington. How do you feel about what happened to your son?" a reporter called out as she briefly stepped onto her porch. "I'm proud of how my son handled himself," she replied firmly. "But I'm heartbroken that in 2023, he still has to face this kind of prejudice. No child should be treated as suspicious for simply existing in a space they've earned the right to be in." Her phone rang, Dr. Raymond Carter calling with an update. "Ms. Washington, I wanted to let you know that Northside Hospital has initiated a full investigation into Ms. Thompson's conduct," he informed her. "As a board member, I can tell you we're taking this very seriously." "Thank you, Dr. Carter," Keisha replied, emotion thick in her voice. "Not just for that, but for being there for my son when I couldn't be." "Your son is an exceptional young man," Dr. Carter said. "You've raised him well. And speaking of exceptional, I just heard from a colleague at MIT who attended Jamal's presentation this morning. Apparently, he was brilliant." At the airline's corporate headquarters, executives were in crisis management mode. Videos of the incident had been viewed over 10 million times across various platforms, with public opinion overwhelmingly critical of how the situation had been handled initially. While the ultimate removal of Karen Thompson rather than Jamal had somewhat salvaged their reputation, the damage control was in full swing. "We need to do more than just issue a standard apology," the chief communications officer insisted during an emergency meeting. "This is an opportunity to demonstrate real commitment to anti-racist policies." By midday, the airline had announced a comprehensive review of their training procedures and the implementation of new anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff. They also revealed that they would be partnering with a civil rights organization to develop better protocols for handling discrimination complaints. Back in Boston, the competition awards ceremony was underway. Jamal sat among his peers, trying to focus on the announcements rather than the occasional whispers and glances directed his way. The presenter reached the category for computer science innovation. Second place, with a project that the judges described as not only technically impressive but socially vital, goes to Jamal Washington from South Atlanta High School. The applause was thunderous as Jamal made his way to the stage, accepting the Crystal Award with a broad smile. Second place came with a $5,000 scholarship and an invitation to present at the National Technology Forum later that year, opportunities that would open doors to colleges and internships previously beyond his reach. As he returned to his seat, his phone vibrated with a text from his mother, "You did it. So proud I could burst. Dr. C just called me with the news." After the ceremony, Jamal was approached by a woman in a crisp business suit who introduced herself as Tanya Rodriguez, Director of Diversity Initiatives at TechFuture, one of the country's leading technology companies. "Mr. Washington, your work is impressive," she said, handing him her business card. "We'd like to discuss a paid summer internship with our AI ethics team. Your perspective on algorithmic bias would be invaluable to our organization." Similar offers came throughout the afternoon, from research institutions, tech companies, and even a publishing opportunity with a science journal focusing on ethical technology. The incident that Karen Thompson had triggered had inadvertently amplified Jamal's voice and research in ways that might otherwise have taken years to achieve. Meanwhile, Karen Thompson sat in a conference room at Northside Hospital, facing the board's ethics committee. The hospital's HR director, legal counsel, and Dr. Carter were present, along with the chief of surgery and other senior administrators. "Ms. Thompson, we've reviewed the video evidence and statements from witnesses," the ethics committee chair began. "Your actions appear to constitute a clear violation of our non-discrimination policies and reflect poorly on this institution's values." Karen nodded, her eyes downcast. The past 48 hours had been a brutal education. She'd been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, her social media accounts bombarded with angry messages, and her reputation in the healthcare community severely damaged. "I understand," she said quietly. "And I accept full responsibility for my actions." Before we determine appropriate next steps, Dr. Carter interjected, "I'd like to hear your perspective on what happened and what you've learned from it." Karen took a deep breath. The easy path would be a superficial apology, blaming stress or miscommunication. But the self-reflection of the past 2 days had cut deeper than that. "What I did was wrong," she began, her voice unsteady but determined. "I made assumptions about Jamal Washington based solely on his appearance. I viewed his presence in first class as somehow inappropriate without any rational basis for that belief. When challenged on my assumptions, I escalated the situation rather than examining my own biases." She paused, collecting herself before continuing. "I've spent my career in healthcare, supposedly dedicated to treating all patients with dignity and respect. But if I'm honest with myself, I have to question whether I've truly lived those values. If I could so quickly judge a teenager I didn't know, have I been making similar judgments about patients, colleagues, or staff who don't look like me?" The room was silent as Karen continued her self-assessment. "I'm not asking to keep my position. I understand the damage I've done. But I would like the opportunity to make amends, not just with a public apology, but with genuine effort to address the biases I clearly harbor and to help others recognize their own." Dr. Carter studied her thoughtfully. "Transformation begins with honest self-examination. It seems you've at least begun that process." The committee adjourned to deliberate Karen's future with the hospital, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Whatever their decision, she knew her journey toward understanding and addressing her own prejudices was just beginning. As evening fell, Jamal returned to his hotel room, emotionally and physically exhausted but filled with a sense of accomplishment that transcended the competition results. He pulled out his phone to call his mother with the full details of his day, but paused when he saw a new email notification. The sender, Karen Thompson. Subject, a sincere apology and request for forgiveness. His finger hovered over the delete button. Did he even want to hear what she had to say? After a moment's hesitation, curiosity won out, and he opened the message to read words that would form an unexpected coda to this life-changing chapter. 3 months later, Jamal Washington stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue tie his mother had bought him for this occasion. The invitation from Tech Future to accept their prestigious summer internship had arrived officially last week, following several interviews and a tour of their innovation campus. At 16, he would be their youngest intern ever, a fact that both excited and intimidated him. "You ready, baby?" Keisha called from the living room. Dr. Carter said he'd meet us there at 6. "Almost," Jamal replied, giving his reflection one final assessment. The past 3 months had transformed him in ways both visible and invisible. There was a new confidence in his posture, a certainty in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The incident on the plane, what social media had dubbed #FirstClassWhileblack, had thrust him unwillingly into the spotlight, but he had found his voice within that unexpected exposure. His second-place win at the Young Scientists of America competition had been just the beginning. The video of his presentation had gone viral alongside the airplane footage, creating a groundswell of interest in his research on algorithmic bias. Several tech companies had reached out with internship offers and even early college scholarship opportunities. MIT had sent a personal letter expressing interest in his future application. But perhaps most surprising was the email from Karen Thompson, received the evening after his competition presentation. He had almost deleted it unread, assuming it would be a defensive justification rather than a genuine apology. Instead, her words had been raw, honest, and deeply reflective. "I can't undo the harm I caused you, and I won't insult your intelligence by claiming I wasn't motivated by racial bias. What I did was wrong, not just morally wrong, but fundamentally unjust to you as a human being deserving of dignity and respect. I am committing myself to the difficult work of confronting my own prejudices and changing not just my behavior but the thinking behind it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that your composure and dignity in the face of my reprehensible behavior has profoundly changed me." Jamal hadn't responded immediately. He'd shared the email with his mother and Dr. Carter, both of whom had cautioned him that forgiveness was his choice to give or withhold, and neither option made him responsible for Karen's growth. In the end, he had sent a brief reply, "Thank you for your apology. I hope this experience leads to meaningful change, not just for you, but for all the environments you influence." Tonight would be the first time he would see Karen Thompson in person since that day on the plane. The event they were both attending, a community forum on bias in healthcare and technology hosted by Northside Hospital, had been Dr. Carter's initiative, inspired partly by what had happened to Jamal. "You clean up nice," Keisha smiled as Jamal emerged from his bedroom. In her nurse's eyes, he would always be her little boy, but the young man before her now carried himself with the poise of someone who had been tested and emerged stronger. "How are you feeling about seeing her?" "I'm okay," Jamal said, and he meant it. "It's not about her anymore. It's about the work." The drive to Northside Hospital's conference center gave Jamal time to reflect on the whirlwind of the past 3 months. The airline had made good on their promises, implementing new anti-bias training for all staff and featuring Jamal in a video shown during those sessions. They had also created a scholarship fund for minority students interested in STEM fields, with Jamal named as the first recipient. The media attention had eventually faded, as it always does, but not before Jamal had used the platform to speak about the broader issues of bias in both technology and society. He had given interviews to major networks, written an op-ed for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and even been invited to speak at a congressional hearing on algorithmic bias in facial recognition systems used by law enforcement. Throughout it all, Dr. Raymond Carter had remained a steadfast mentor, guiding Jamal through the unfamiliar terrain of public attention and helping him leverage the experience into opportunities rather than letting it define him as a victim. They arrived at the conference center to find it buzzing with activity. Healthcare professionals, technology experts, community leaders, and students filled the space, creating a diverse gathering of perspectives. Dr. Carter greeted them at the entrance, his dignified presence commanding respect even in casual conversation. "There he is, our keynote speaker," Dr. Carter smiled, shaking Jamal's hand firmly. "Nervous?" "A little," Jamal admitted. "But I've got this." "Yes, you do, Dr." Carter agreed. "Just remember, speak your truth. That's all anyone can ask." As they made their way through the crowd, Jamal spotted Karen Thompson near the refreshment table. She was engaged in conversation with several hospital colleagues, her posture less commanding than he remembered from the plane. When she turned and saw him, a flash of recognition and discomfort crossed her face. For a moment, neither moved. Then Karen excused herself from her group and approached Jamal and his mother. "Mr. Washington," she said, her voice steady but humble. "Ms. Washington. Thank you both for coming tonight." "Mr. Washington is speaking tonight," Keisha replied, protective instincts evident in her tone. "We're here for that reason." "Of course," Karen nodded. "I've read the outline of your presentation, Jamal. Your insights on how bias in healthcare mirrors bias in technology are illuminating." Jamal studied the woman who had so profoundly impacted his life. She looked different somehow, the entitled confidence replaced by something more thoughtful. "Thank you," he replied simply. "I understand you'll be participating in the panel discussion afterward." "Yes," Karen confirmed. "As part of my education. After what happened, the hospital board gave me a choice between resignation or completing intensive bias training and community service. I chose the latter. Part of that commitment is speaking honestly about my actions and what I've learned since then." An awkward silence fell between them, 3 people bound together by a moment none of them had anticipated. "I should prepare for my speech," Jamal said finally. "Excuse me." As he walked away, Dr. Carter at his side, the older man spoke quietly, "You handled that with grace." "She seems different," Jamal observed. "People can change when forced to confront the consequences of their actions," Dr. Carter replied. "The question is whether that change is sustained when the spotlight fades." The forum began promptly at 7, with Dr. Carter introducing Jamal to enthusiastic applause. Standing at the podium, looking out at the diverse faces of healthcare professionals, tech industry representatives, and community members, Jamal felt a surreal sense of purpose. 3 months ago, he had been just another brilliant kid with big dreams. Now he stood here, his voice amplified by circumstances he never would have chosen but had ultimately embraced. "My research began with a simple question," he started. "Why don't facial recognition systems see black faces as accurately as white ones?" But what I discovered went beyond code and algorithms. I found that technology inherits our human biases, magnifies them, and feeds them back to us as objective truth. He proceeded to explain how his algorithm worked to correct for these biases, illustrating complex concepts with accessible examples that had the audience nodding in understanding. Then he pivoted to the broader implications. "What happened to me on that flight to Boston was algorithm bias made human. A snap judgment based on incomplete data. An assumption that I didn't belong in first class because people who look like me rarely occupy those spaces. The difference is that while I can rewrite code to correct a flawed algorithm, addressing human bias requires something more profound, a willingness to recognize it, name it, and actively work against it." From her seat in the third row, Karen Thompson listened intently, occasionally jotting notes. When Jamal finished his presentation to resounding applause, she joined in without hesitation, recognizing the wisdom and insight coming from a young man she had once dismissed solely because of his appearance. The panel discussion that followed included Karen, Dr. Carter, a technology ethics professor, and the hospital's chief diversity officer. Karen spoke candidly about her actions on the plane and the painful self-examination that had followed. "I considered myself a good person," she admitted to the audience. "I would have told you I didn't have a prejudiced bone in my body. But when confronted with my own behavior on that video, watching myself make assumptions about Jamal based solely on his race and age, I couldn't hide from the truth any longer." After the formal program concluded, attendees mingled during a reception. Jamal found himself surrounded by healthcare professionals and tech industry representatives eager to discuss his research and experience. Several offered business cards and potential opportunities. As the evening wound down, Karen approached Jamal one final time, now accompanied by a man Jamal assumed was her husband. "I want to thank you," she said quietly. "Not for forgiving me, that's not something you owe me, but for turning what I did to you into something positive for others. You've shown remarkable character." Jamal considered her words. "My mom always says that what matters isn't what happens to you, but what you do with it." Keisha, overhearing as she joined them, smiled proudly. "That's right. And what my son has done is use this experience to amplify the important work he was already doing." "Your son is extraordinary," Karen's husband said sincerely. "You must be very proud." "I am," Keisha replied, placing a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "But not just because of his intelligence or accomplishments. I'm proud of the man he's becoming, someone who stands tall in the face of injustice without becoming bitter." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Carter approached with news. "Jamal, the hospital board was so impressed with your presentation that they'd like to establish a permanent summer internship program for minority high school students interested in healthcare technology. They'd like to name it after you." The offer was unexpected and moving. "I'd be honored," Jamal replied, "as long as it creates opportunities for other kids like me." Later that night, as Jamal and Keisha drove home, a comfortable silence filled the car. Finally, Keisha spoke the question that had been on her mind all evening: "Are you okay with how things turned out with that woman? With Karen?" Jamal gazed out the window at the Atlanta skyline, considering the question carefully. "I think so," he said eventually. "Not because what she did was okay, it wasn't. But because something good came from it. My research is reaching more people. Important conversations are happening. And maybe she really has changed. I hope so. When did you get so wise? Keisha asked, her voice thick with emotion. I had a good teacher, Jamal smiled, reaching over to squeeze his mother's hand. The following Monday, Jamal boarded another first-class flight, this one taking him to Tech Future's headquarters to begin his internship. As he settled into his seat, he couldn't help but recall the last time he'd sat in first class. So much had changed since then. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile. First time in first class? No, Jamal replied confidently. But thanks for asking. As the plane took off, Jamal Washington looked out at the clouds below, no longer questioning whether he belonged in this seat or any other space he had earned through his hard work and brilliance. The journey that had begun with an act of prejudice had transformed into something more powerful, a platform for change, a catalyst for growth, and a testament to resilience in the face of bias. This story reminds us that bias exists in both technology and human interactions, often operating below our conscious awareness. Jamal's experience highlights how racism can appear in unexpected places, even in spaces like first-class cabins where the only qualification should be a valid ticket. Yet the story also demonstrates the power of dignity in the face of discrimination. By maintaining his composure and channeling his experience into his research, Jamal transformed a humiliating incident into a platform for meaningful change. For Karen, the public consequences of her actions forced uncomfortable but necessary self-reflection about biases she had long denied. Dr. Carter showed how bystanders can become powerful allies by speaking truth to power. The most profound lesson lies in recognizing that addressing bias, whether in algorithms or human hearts, begins with acknowledging its existence. Technology inherits our human prejudices, but unlike humans, it can be reprogrammed with better data. For people to change, they must first confront their biases honestly, then commit to the ongoing work of transformation. What unconscious biases might be influencing your own interactions with others? Have you ever been Jamal, Karen, or Dr. Carter in a similar situation? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming discrimination. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Together we can create more awareness and foster positive change. Thank you for watching and being part of this important conversation. Remember, our greatest challenges often become our most powerful platforms for making a difference in the world.